Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to Duran ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today is the day where we will talk not about ASEAN but about Malaysia in conjunction with Hari Malaysia, which falls on 16 September 2015 this year on another 2 days if I'm not mistaken. So on this very beautiful Monday, we are going to talk about this one very young gentleman all the way from Sarawak. He's also an international relations and diplomacy committee member, part of the Malaysian Youth Parliament. His name is Syed Nizamuddin Syed Khassim. Hi, how are you?
Hi Arlene, how are you? I'm fine, thank you.
So, today we are going to talk about a topic that is definitely closer to people in all over, Peninsula and also Sabah and Sarawak. I'm talking about Hari Malaysia. First of all, what is your impression on Hari Malaysia?
Right, Arlene. Now, first and foremost, I think that Hari Malaysia should have been given the importance as compared to 31st August 1957. Most importantly, because that was when Malaysia was practically created. You see, in the Malaysian Agreement 1963, was Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore formed a new entity as equal partners. Now, that entity is called the Federation of Malaysia. For us, practically, in fact, Federation of Malaysia only existed in 1963 and not in 1957. Mm-hmm. Certainly not 31st August 1957. Now, we like to call, our National Day as Independence Day for Malaysia. Mm-hmm. But the fact remains that Malaysia was never conquered or ruled by any forces. You see,
it's a federation.
Was it given independence. Yes, a federation. It was created by our forefathers who come to their conclusions that this was better for the region. The reality is that Malaysia is only 52 years old. You see, when taking the whole picture, while respecting the rights of both Sabahans and Sarawakians, Malaysia does not have an Independence Day. Mm-hmm. You see, even though the government has renamed Hari Kemerdekaan as Hari Kebangsaan last year, it still uses 31st August as the so-called Tarikh Keramat. Now, using the 31st as the priority creates the presumption that the states join Malaysia rather than forming Malaysia. It creates the false perception that the only reason why Malaysia is free from the crown is because of their association with Malaya. And of course, that doesn't go down well with most of the population within Sabah and Sarawak.
The interesting point I want to highlight about Hari Malaysia is only up until recently that Malaysians started to feel that, hey, why we never celebrated Hari Malaysia prior to this? Especially in the minds of Peninsular Malaysians, most of the time when we think about Independence Day, we think about of course, the 31st August 1957, but we don't really have that much imprint in terms of, there's such thing as the formation of the Federation of Malaysia on the 16th of September. It's very much, I would say, a Sabahan and Sarawakian affair. And now the government is trying to put a U-turn of making only one day of celebrating Hari Kebangsaan, or in this case, it would probably be Hari Malaysia. And you are not really in agreement with that idea itself. But do you think if we were to have a specific day on celebrating Hari Malaysia, what kind of history or what kind of memory that we should remember on Hari Malaysia?
It's interesting that you brought out about memories and histories, Arlene, because when we take a look at the national narrative of Malaysia, for example, written in our textbooks when we were young, the modern sense, or at least what was written in the textbooks, was that the modern nationalism within Malaysia was said to be sparked off after the huge protest of the Malays against the Malayan Union in 1946. which eventually led to the formation of UMNO and which eventually led to the independence of Malaya in 1957. Now, in our textbooks, the formation of Malaysia was mentioned as a mere afterthought, despite the fact that Malaya has ceased to exist in 1963 and the creation of a new nation called Malaysia in 1963. But our narrative, however, unfortunately, is still Malaya-centric. 31st August 1957 was then rewritten as the birth date of Malaysia, whereas 16 September 1963, as you all know, is the day when Malaysia was brought forth into this world. Now, Prof. Khoo Kay Kim, I think in the last few days, actually mentioned that 16 September was then, in 1963 and 64, was celebrated with very much fanfare because it marked the birth of a brand new nation, created together by independent minds for a greater sphere of cooperation. In fact, during that time, Malaysia Forever became a compulsory song in Singapore schools. Now, it is important to note that in 1963, Tunku Abdul Rahman made it to the front page of Times magazine because of the great feat that he did by assisting in the creation of a new nation called Malaysia. He became the leader of a new nation. But it was not celebrated much. 16 September was not very much celebrated after the separation with Singapore in 1965. Now, in hindsight, certain quarters in Sabah and Sarawak felt as if they were punished for Singapore's quote-unquote sin in 1965. Now, that's the whole idea. It should also be noted that Sabah and Sarawak are not similar to Hawaii, which was an addition to the old federation, because quite a number of colleagues from the peninsula actually argued that, look, if Hawaii could actually celebrate 4th of July with the rest of the federation, why not Sabah and Sarawak? But the fact is, it's different. Hawaii was just an addition to the old federation, i.e. the United States of America. Sabah and Sarawak are also not similar to Pondicherry and Goa, which were new states added to the existing Federation of India. 16 September 1963 was the birth of Malaysia, and I could say that the formation of Malaysia is closer to the American Declaration of Independence on 4th of July, which is the original 13 states. All of them were equal partners to the new federal system, and I would say that 16 September resembles closely with
the 4th
America's
of July.
4th of July.
I see.
Yeah.
And the US, they have a few dates, right? I mean, when it comes to like Independence Day and when it comes to the formation of the Federation of United States. That's what they call it. and in this case, in the case of the US, what can we learn from them if we were to have a successful identity or a memory or history on Hari Malaysia?
I'm not so sure if we can take the United States as an example, Arlene, because now there are many kinds of federations in this world. There's a congruent federation where most of the units within the federation would possess similar demographics and similar ethnicities, which is like the United States of America. Now, Malaysia is an incongruent federation where certain units within the federation possess different demographics, which creates ethnic, religious, and linguistic cleavage. Now, it's quite similar to Belgium, where they have Dutch-speaking Flemish population, they have French-speaking population, and ethnic Germans. Pakistan, before Bangladesh's War of Liberation, was an incongruent federation because they have the Bengali speaking in the East Pakistan and they have Urdu speaking in West Pakistan. Now, the federal government must address these challenges which rise from linguistic, ethnic, religious or other regional differences in order for Malaysia to succeed and to survive. You see, because the failure of doing so will create political unrest and, as what we can see today, various secessionist movements. Bangladesh started off similarly. You see, the Bangladesh movement for independence, for an example, kicked off when the central government in Islamabad refused to acknowledge the challenges that I have listed down earlier. Linguistic, religious, ethnic, regional differences within Bangladesh, which was that East Pakistan. And they treated the region similarly with the rest of its provinces, which they should not. You see, some of the Pakistani politicians in West Pakistan then, as well as certain quarters in West Pakistan, could not comprehend these challenges and added fuel to the fire by questioning why is it that East Pakistan requires special attention as compared to the rest of the provinces. Now, this is frighteningly similar to the situation that's happening now in Malaysia, where certain quarters in Peninsula, as well as the oppositions, could not comprehend why certain special provisions need to be given to the states of Sabah and Sarawak. Thus, we have movements like Sarawak for Sarawakians, or S4S, as well as Sabah Sarawak Keluar Malaysia, or SSKM, which is not unique to the long list of secessionist movements worldwide. Now, these are the challenges within the federation.
But
we can learn a few things.
Sorry,
we can learn a few things from India. Yep.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you on that because when you talk about Sabah and Sarawak, a couple of small groups of people trying to reimagine, like, you know, maybe we should have our own nation, our own state called Sabah or Sarawak. This small secessionist movement I'm talking about. But the interesting part of it is only becoming more and more prominent, like about this last 10 years or last 5 years. I'm wondering why.
I would say that it's an accumulative process after all these years. You see, because these political frustrations, you see, lack of development, lack of say in what they wanted to say, eventually led, and also greater number of people who are educated, led to this great sense of being disenfranchised by the federal government. You see, because let's take a look at in the administration and governance, right? We in Sabah and Sarawak, there's this big spatial inequality and economic differences and challenges which are unique to these two states, which we not discuss on national discourse. There was a time actually in 1964 when Tun Razak actually called up one of the Selangor State Development Officer, Datuk Harun Arifin, and sent him to Sarawak to ensure that Sarawak could catch up with the rest of the Federation. Now, Tun Razak's words were practically dramatic at the time, I think. But what he said was that Malaysia is not working. Now, what he meant at that time was that for Malaysia to succeed, the whole of the Federation must develop together in order for it to succeed. Now, so there were actually conscious efforts back then from the federal government to ensure that Sabah and Sarawak could catch up with the Federation. But after pushing for industrialization and focusing on heavy industries in the 80s, you know, practically our first industrial revolution in the 80s, development, however, has been very much focused on West Malaysia. The impact back then was not felt, and the people were, I would say, quite less educated as they are now. So this sense of dissatisfaction was not that clear. And other than that, Sabah and Sarawak feel, there's this great feeling of being disenfranchised from the great political debate in Malaysia, which are usually race conscious. Sabahans and Sarawakians, they could not participate in the great Malaysian political debate, about the Islamic State, for an example, about hudud. This great political debate, so-called, in the in the Malaysian Federation, could not be participated by those in Sabah and Sarawak, because what they want is different. Their political needs are different. Their self-aspiration is different. So, having felt this, and that plus the feeling of being disenfranchised economically, led to the secessionist movement, which came on as of late. And also because there's this great feeling of not being wanted by the Federation. You see, when you look at the allocation of grants, the capitation grant, for an example, means that the federal government will allocate grants based on the populations, based on the state population size. On surface level, this policy is fair and justifiable, but upon closer inspection, it ignores the differences in infrastructure costs, which are generally higher in Sabah and Sarawak.
I see.
Roads remain an issue in these two Bornean states, despite ranking top 3 among the states with highest provision for development fund. Arlene, however, Sarawak's road condition is still the worst.
So
I'm not making this up. Yeah.
So economic.
economic issues,
Mm-hmm.
political dissatisfaction, sense of disenfranchisement, and the fact that the government is pandering more towards creating, quote unquote, an Islamic country, made the great population within Sabah and Sarawak dissatisfied with the federal government. So I think this gap needs to be bridged.
Okay. Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we'll discuss more about the future of Hari Malaysia and, of course, the Borneo dilemma.
Monday Morning Matters
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN and you are back with me. And also Syed Nizamuddin, Syed Khassim from the International Relations and Diplomacy Committee, the Malaysian Youth Parliament. We had a long discussion about why Sabah and Sarawakians feel that they are being neglected in terms of the formation of the Malaysian identity for various reasons, of course. But let's focus on you yourself, Syed Nizamuddin. I mean, you grew up in Sarawak as a child. What are the first few things that you learn about your either Sarawakian identity or your Malaysian identity?
I would say that both Sarawakian and Malaysian identity, it's quite intertwined, you know. I mean, being a Sarawakian means you're part of the bigger Federation of Malaysia. But I think the real question should be, how would the rest of the Federation see each other?
Mm-hmm.
From my experience when I was in university, when I was in Shah Alam, when there's semester break, when, we will be contacting one another. So some of my friends would be asking me, so, hey, when are you coming back to Malaysia? So, it's like, hey, isn't Sarawak part of Malaysia?
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel that as if Sabah and Sarawak is not part of the larger Malaysian consciousness. Mm-hmm. When, West Malaysians talk about, us Malaysians, it's usually West Malaysians.
Mm-hmm.
For an example, when they say that, look, I've gone around throughout all of Malaysia during the last holiday. Oh, so you've been to Kota Kinabalu? Oh, no, not Sabah and Sarawak. So, even in West Malaysians, most of the West Malaysians, the unconscious mind, they think that Sabah and Sarawak is not practically part of Malaysia, which is quite offending to those in Sabah and Sarawak.
But I want to share my experience growing up, not having that much a memory of Sabah and Sarawak other than in our textbooks, of course. Even in terms of interaction, I still remember when I was younger, as a child, when we talk about Sabah and Sarawak, it seems to be like a distant land away. Of course, it's divided by sea, but besides that, the first time I recall meeting a Sabahan and Sarawakian, actually, it was back in the late 90s. I think at that time, the aviation industry started to take root in Malaysia, where people started to travel to and fro more frequently. I think that's the first time I actually really met someone from Sabah and Sarawak. And the impression that we have on them, unfortunately, as we is like, they are foreigners from Indonesia, but they are actually not. Even in terms of work opportunity at that time, I still remember there are different rates of employment rates between people from Peninsula and people from Sabah and Sarawak, which is really unfortunate at that time. But I don't know whether that kind of myth or that kind of idea about people from Sabah and Sarawak still persists.
I think, Arlene, is that what we lack in our great federation is that there's this lack of conscious movement to bring closer relationship or to foster a sense of identity among those in Peninsula, Sabah, and Sarawak. In fact, even in Sarawak, we don't even know much about those from Sabah. In Sabah, they don't even know much about those in Sarawak, for example. Although this is Sabah and Sarawak Keluar Malaysia, it's practically very much how to say this, a political aspiration, which is not really grounded. So you can see that there are different aspirations. I mean, even among the secessionist movement, they're practically fighting among each other because the sense of identity, the sense of self brought forward they don't feel it there. So this, when you want to foster a relationship, when you want to create a community, there needs to be conscious and continuous effort to do so. Most of the effort to create the Malaysian identity, to create a sense of comradeship among those in Peninsular Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak, were only there. I mean, they were practically active in the 60s and 70s. But after that, we took it for granted. And we thought that, hey, Malaysia has been here for 50 years, we should give it a rest. I think people know each other. That's practically wrong, because when you want to create a community, when you want to foster a community, there needs to be a continuous effort and concerted effort among all of those who are involved to create a bigger identity. Yeah. So we have been taking things for granted for the last few years, and we are only panicking now after all of these secessionist movements coming out from the woods. So it shouldn't be so. We should have this conscious effort to create this. I was working with the Sarawak Foundation before, and they have this students exchange program. And what I realized from the students exchange program, between those in Sabah and Sarawak, those in Sarawak to go to Peninsula, and those from in Peninsula to go to Sabah and Sarawak, what I noticed is that the number of students actually dwindled down, because there's this sense of fear of being part of being taken as part of the other among all of those who are present. I mean, especially among the native Dayaks in Sarawak, they are quite scared of their children being converted to be Muslims. And likewise, there are quite a number of parents who are concerned in Peninsular Malaysia that their parents that their children might be Christianized if they're sent to Sabah and Sarawak. So there's this sense of fear and mistrust amongst each other, which is bad for the federation in the long run. I think something needs to be done for that.
And I think when it comes to Peninsular Malaysia, when it comes to the formation of identity, it's very fixed, it's very boxed. So when you have people from Sabah and Sarawak who look quite the same but are coming from various religious background and still are able to live together peacefully and speak the same language, for someone in Peninsula, it's quite confusing, because identity in Sabah and Sarawak those from Sabah and Sarawak do not really fit well into the identity formation that has been there in Peninsular Malaysia. And I think that is the kind of conflict or identity conflict that people in Peninsula would actually have. I still remember, I think back in the days of university, because I study in a local university, and I still remember there are times being friends with people from Sabah, Sarawak. A lot of the times I actually have a lot of surprise moment, like, oh, this is how you do things, this is how you view things, this is how you get together. And I think it's really beautiful, because knowing different cultures that is as in existence in Malaysia, and we never really thought about it, especially people from West Malaysia. We always have a very boxed mindset about society. I think that is one of the great things about getting to know people. I think university is one of those very few platforms where you are able to mingle with people from various background and coming from different parts of Malaysia.
I totally agree with you. University is one of those platforms where people from different backgrounds, from different states in Malaysia could actually mingle together. But the sad reality is that, Arlene, people are afraid to mingle with one another these days. Only recently that I got to know that one of the parents in UiTM Sarawak actually decided for his son to further his studies in Sarawak and not to further his studies in Penang because of the fear that his children might be converted when he's sent to Peninsular Malaysia.
But in Penang.
And other concerns, I mean, because he got this offer from UiTM Penang for his studies there. So he deferred and he requested for his son, the parents requested for the son to be sent to UiTM Sarawak instead. Whatever course that UiTM Sarawak has to offer, because they do not want their children to be sent.
But I mean, to be fair,
to this fear that they could.
Sorry, to be fair.
So that's fear among the parents. I mean, I think it's quite similar to even in those in Peninsular Malaysia.
Yeah, just to be fair, that I think the fear is something that is real. The threats of Islamization. I mean, even among Muslims themselves, they are starting to question like what kind of Islam that we should focus on. This and society seems to be going towards the route of conservatism, and this is a fear that is shared among either Muslims and non-Muslims alike.
I would agree with you. I mean, I cannot argue against these parents, because among other things that they brought up was that how are they going to pray since they could not mention Allah and they could not bring the Malay Bible to Penang to study, and how is he supposed to go to church? How is he supposed to pray since he has been praying in Malay since he was young? So that created some sort of restriction among the people to mingle with one another. So I saw that as an opportunity lost for Malaysia to learn amongst each other, the uniqueness that we have amongst each other. So if that is not contained, or if that is not addressed properly, I'm afraid that these tiny bits of tension will eventually lead to the dismemberment of Malaysia, which I fear most.
That's really, really a fear that is valid, I would say, in terms of the future of Malaysia. Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we come back, we will talk more about Hari Malaysia from the perspective of Sabah and Sarawak.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. You're back with me and of course with Syed Nizamuddin, Syed Khassim from the Malaysia Youth Parliament. So, continuing our discussion from the earlier discourse on the fear that Sabah and Sarawakians have, especially when it comes to Islamization. But what about the memories, the shared memories that Sabah and Sarawakians have with the West Malaysian? Because in Peninsular Malaysia, one of the, I guess, strongest imprint that is sort of creating this undercurrent sentiment especially among Malay and Chinese, is the racial riot in 1969. People don't really talk about it, but they have some bits and pieces of knowing that part of history. But what about from people in Sabah and Sarawak? Do you have any memories that is still persist in the minds of people there, especially in relations with identity formation and nation building?
When it comes to those in Sabah and Sarawak, we don't have, when we talk about 13 May 1969, most of those in Sabah and Sarawak actually feel that this is a Malayan affair, and this has nothing to do with them. When it comes to this consciousness, especially those in Sarawak, I think the fondest memories that we had as Malaysia, as part of this greater federation, there were two great memories. One is during the communist insurgency, which started from in the 1940s until 60s. So what happened then was quite a number of the Iban Rangers, the Sarawak Rangers, actually served in the Malaysian peninsula at that time. So this created a sense of comradeship among those, among the soldiers, and eventually the effect trickled down to the rest of the population, because, hey, we served the Federation together, we practically combated against the same enemy, and we stood tall together. The next memory was the confrontation after the formation of Malaysia, in which we stood together as a great nation against the external threat, i.e. Indonesia. So those two memories created a huge imprint on Sarawakians, and pretty much, especially among the Ibans, where many of them were involved in the Sarawak Rangers before. So that gave them a sense of pride.
I want to touch on the Indonesian confrontation, because it's a piece of history that is not really, I guess, in the conscious mind of West Malaysian, but in how severe was the confrontation being faced in Sabah and Sarawak? Because I know it's the closest part of border that is next to Indonesia.
Okay, when talking about the Indonesian confrontation in the 60s, it has to take into account other events which occurred in the 60s. Among others are the Brunei Rebellion in 1962, and of course the communist insurgencies in the 60s. Overall, basically, the Sarawakians see all of these as the they see the 1960s as the tumultuous years of Sarawak's birth, or Sarawak's independence in 1963. So this created, this left a huge imprint on the Sarawakians' mindset. For example, the former Sarawak's chief minister, Tan Sri Stephen Kalungingkan, his brother was practically killed by one of the communist insurgencies. So this left an indelible mark on the Sarawakians as a whole, on the sacrifices that they did for the Federation of Malaysia. But these sacrifices were not included in the national narrative. For example, the soldier who actually received the award from Queen Elizabeth II for his service in Johor, it's ironic that he is practically seen as a great serviceman, as a great person by the government of the United Kingdom, but not so much by the Federation of Malaysia. Only lately was he actually given the respect which was supposed to be given to him since then.
So when it comes to the I would say contemporary memories that Sabahan and Sarawakian have about Malaysia as a whole, what kind of idea that the young Sabahan and Sarawakian have about Malaysia right now? Do they see themselves as becoming more integrated towards the Malaysian society, especially with Asia and all these conveniences of transportation, air transportation or sea, or do they see themselves as more, I would say, empowered, being a Sabahan and Sarawakian, seeing that their identity is becoming more and more solid in comparison in the past, where they feel like they are just the half sister of the rest of Federation of Malaysia?
In answering this question, Arlene, I have to be honest and say that ironically, despite the fact that with high level of connectivity among those in Peninsular Malaysia and those in Sabah and Sarawak, the identities among all these three regions became more distinct, rather than becoming more amalgamated. For an example, when you look at the discourse among the youths in Peninsular Malaysia, especially those who are active, those who are politically active, for an example, this great talk about using Islamic parlance in their debates, and using Islamic parlance for their arguments, which is completely foreign to those in Sabah and Sarawak, which are then not comfortable with. Not that they're not comfortable with, they are okay with Islamic parlance because they use Malay in their services in church, but they're not allowed to use it. So there's this great distinction. I mean, the distinction became greater, and I think people became much more divided and there's no conscious effort to address this issue at all. I mean, perhaps the government has taken for granted and practically canvassed every of this young generation as the Gen Ys or the Gen Zs. But the fact is, the youths in Sabah, the youths in Sarawak, and the youths in Peninsula are becoming much more divided. The youths in Sarawak, for example, especially those in urban areas, their sense of Sarawak nationalism is increasing day by day. Not so much because of repression, but because of the sense of belonging. I see. A sense of belonging and also sense of fear. Although the fear may not be there, but there's this sense of fear, the perception of being repressed. So these issues are not addressed properly. And I think that these aspirations, rather than banning them, we should engage with them, strategically engage with these aspirants, I would say. But that has yet to be done.
When you say strategically engage, can you define more about it? Can you explain more? How can the government or even society move forward to create greater integration on the grassroots?
Now, we live in a democratic society. Or at least we like to believe that we live in a democratic society. So having said that, what their fears, their aspirations, and their sense of being able to be who they are needs to be respected, especially those who are marked differently due to their regional differences, especially those in Sabah and Sarawak, in order for the rest of the Federation to move forward. Because if these issues are not addressed, then these issues will pull Malaysia down and we will not be able to compete with our neighbors within the ASEAN region. Now, talking about ASEAN, it is interesting that the government is actually doing a lot of effort to foster this so-called ASEAN identity. We are introduced with the cultures of those from Cambodia, from Laos, from Myanmar. But what are the efforts that we have undertook in order for those in Malaysia to know one another? Not just from Sabah and Sarawak, but not many Malays actually know that Hindus don't take beef. Surprisingly, not many Chinese actually know that what halal meals actually constitute of. So these differences, these need to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed consciously. We cannot leave it to chance. What happened? The sense of unity among Sarawakians and Sabahans, it was mostly due to chance. An historical narrative, but not so much conscious effort by the federal government to foster sense of national unity. I think that needs to be done first.
So, in this coming Hari Malaysia, perhaps you can share with us on what are the key areas that Malaysian government can do to enhance the identity formation for the younger generation, not just in terms of reaching out or creating dialogues, but I guess in this sense, in terms of policy, what sort of policy that the Malaysian government can do?
There are three areas that I look into. Number one is of course, the national narrative. We are definitely lacking in national narrative. When we talk about national narrative, it's usually focused on those in West Malaysia, especially in 1946 and 1957. We need a national narrative which kick-started in 1963. We need to emphasize more on what we have gone through together as a nation, rather than what actually distincts us in the past. Number two is on administrative issues. On administrative issues, I think more focus should be looked into the administration of these two states, which are not only separated geographically from the capital in Kuala Lumpur, but also on how the inequality and disparity needs to be addressed. Because as I have said earlier on, when if the government decided to focus on giving grants based on the population, it may sound fair, but eventually in the end, it does not take into account the challenges that need to be undertaken when addressing the issues in Sabah and Sarawak, especially on poverty and access to health and education. For example, maybe a student in Peninsular Malaysia may require funding from the government of around 50,000 per year. But in Sabah and Sarawak, in certain parts of it especially, where they are disconnected from the rest of the population, they would need more, they require more. The economies of scale, I don't think it should count here because after all, these people are Malaysians. And last but not least is the economic balance or the Great Malaysian Common Market, which we need to relook into, because after the high industrialization in Malaysia, which were focused on Sabah and Sarawak, most of the products of these producers were dumped to places in Sabah and Sarawak. So they became net importers of these products. So they don't produce much, but they import a lot of this stuff. So they could not choose from other parts of the world, but because of this great common market. So I think more needs to be looked into this strategy. I don't think that I would want to delve more into this because it may take like I think 1 or 2 hours. But in essence, the Malaysian common market needs to be relooked into.
With that, thank you very much and Selamat Hari Malaysia.
Selamat Hari Malaysia to you too, Arlene.